Good afternoon and welcome to this week's CERIAS Security Seminar. Our speaker today is David Ehinger. He was the Director, Information Technology Security for Rolls-Royce, and his talk is The Effect of Rootkits on the Corporate Environment. Mr. Ehinger has been an employee of Rolls-Royce and its predecessor for nearly 23 years. Early in his career, he served as several engineering positions, mainly in support of military products and services. In 1998, Mr. Ehinger joined the security staff as the Technology Control Officer. In 2003, he was appointed as the Director of Information Technology Security for Rolls-Royce North America. He's responsible for establishing information security policy for Rolls-Royce America. He is also responsible for conducting investigations and responding to incidents involving the company's information technology assets, and supports the company's legal staff in responding to electronic discovery requests.
Good afternoon. As we go through this, feel free to interrupt me with questions anytime along the way. I think we'll have enough time to cover everything. When I put the presentation together, too, I wasn't sure exactly what your level of expertise was going to be. So if I go too fast, slow me down. If I start to drag, say, hey, we know all that. Move on. Okay? We're talking a little bit about the effect of rootkits on the corporate environment, and this is really based on a real-world problem that we experienced about 18 months ago, along with a large number of other major organizations, particularly in the aerospace and defense industries. Okay, some of it you may have actually read about in the newspaper, but it may have been somewhat cloaked to exactly what was going on. Does everybody know what a rootkit is? Anybody doesn't know what a rootkit is? Great, then we'll move on. This is the way the rootkit got to us. You have an employee, and they get an email, which happens all the time. We get a lot of email. Okay, you guys probably get a lot of just on your personal accounts. Can you imagine what it's like for some of our folks in the business side? But in this case, the email was from what looked like just a normal Rolls-Royce user, and it had a subject line that was completely believable because it had to do with a potential employment opportunity on one of our programs that everybody knew we were doing. And in fact, the document that was attached to this was actually a company document that had somehow gotten into the hands of the folks that sent it back in, and it had actually been used about 2 months before this was sent out to do an actual employment offer. Okay, so it was a real document coming from what looked to be a real person employed by the company. So, you know, a person seeing this, why would they be suspicious? And when they open it up, if you just look at the email, it looks fine. You know, there's nothing here that would necessarily draw your suspicion, with the exception of if you look at the title of the attachment. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's not just a .doc file. It has about 3 other extensions attached to it. It's ... something else. So if you were looking closely at that, you might say, well, that looks a little weird. Okay? But for most people, most users, most general users that don't understand a lot of the technology that use it, it's just, hey, click away. It's a document. I want to see what it says. And in this case, now they're owned. Because unfortunately, while they're reading the document, there's malware attached to the document that's begun to execute itself and install a rootkit on their machine. Now, a lot of things could happen here to alert you that there's something wrong. Okay? A lot of our machines have personal firewalls on that I don't know what kind of personal firewalls you all may be using, but it may have come up and said, hey, service blah, 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 blah wants to connect to the internet, and this program has changed since the last time. Do you want to allow it to connect? Okay? Now, unfortunately, when you have a lot of those firewalls, a lot of users see that come up a lot, so they say, oh, yes, yes, yes. You know, it's always yes, okay? There could be other indications that your computer is connected to the internet even though you haven't opened the browser. But again, most users, they wouldn't know if that was normal or not because they don't pay that close of attention to exactly what their computer is going to do. So even though, you know, they may have indications, they may just think it's normal operation, when in fact it's really not. It's really an indication that there is a problem here that ought to be investigated, and maybe you ought to call somebody to let them know what's going on. What could the user have done in this case? Well, just opening the email, there was no indication unless you happen to know. In this particular case, the purported sender of the email had actually left the company about 6 weeks before. Okay, But not everybody in the company would have known that, because if they didn't know this person personally, they wouldn't have known that they moved on to do other things. But there was reason to be suspicious when you looked at the chief engineer document. It was chiefengineer.jsf.stovoll.crw.q.doc. Now that's kind of a strange combination of extensions. And that should have gotten their attention. In that case, it could have called the purported originator of the email and said, hey, did you really send this? And what's this document supposed to be all about? Because it looks kind of weird. But they didn't. The way that we found out about it wasn't through any type of fancy systems, wasn't through any type of fancy, gosh, we got our act so well together that we knew exactly what was going on, is because the email didn't just come to people in Rolls-Royce. It was sent to a lot of other organizations. And in the document it said, if you're interested in this position, call so-and-so at this phone number. Well, so-and-so started getting a lot of calls from other organizations saying, what's this all about? And that's what alerted us to the fact that there may have been a problem. In this case, what happened was that the originator spoofed the internal email account name of the person who was purported to have sent it. Okay? Now, most general users wouldn't know what to look for in this case, and they didn't. They just clicked away and did what they thought they were supposed to do. But of course, if you've ever used Outlook, and this is what we use and what a lot of companies use for their email client for the users, you can find out where the email actually did originate by simply right-clicking on the email and going to the options block. And then what happens is that you can see the email header. And in the email header, you can find a lot of information. In this case, we can see exactly the path that the email took to get from the originator to the destination. And you'll notice that it goes through a couple of servers in the 132 range of IP addresses. Those are our gateway servers. Those are legitimate Rolls-Royce servers over in the UK where our email comes in. And then you can see that it goes from the UK to a North America server. But if you look real close, where I have it highlighted in green there, you'll see an address outside of the 132 range in the 60 range, which is where the email actually did originate. And if you do a lookup on that 60 range, first of all, you know it's not one of ours because it's completely out of the Rolls-Royce ranges, and rather than being something that we generally deal with, it is a publicly addressable IP address. Most people would not know what to do with that, but we do, and we took a look at it, and we did a whois check on that, and what you find out is that originating email address is in Taiwan. Okay, and it's managed by the Chinese Network Communications Group, which is a PRC-owned company that manages a lot of this. Now, it's a huge block of addresses, so there's no way for you to find out specifically who the originator was, but you can find out that it did originate in China. Okay, that's not a good thing. And I think I just covered all this. Again, the user would not have known that other than if they knew how to look at the header and make sense out of that information. And I think I told you about this already. And then at this point, when we received the call from IT on the IT security side, we started looking at internet activity to say, okay, first of all, how many people got this email? What does the email consist of? What kind of activity is the malicious code that's attached to it trying to perform? And what we found was that there was evidence by looking at our internet logs of data leakage from inside the company to these areas where the email originated. And we also observed that it was a continuing thing. So in other words, people did get infected, and it was continuing on. Leakage are going from Europe and from the US, and there were a number of clients involved. And as we started doing the investigation, we discovered that there were earlier undetected attacks of a similar nature. Okay? Because remember, like I said, we only found out of this one because the users called us and said, hey, people keep calling us about this message that we never sent out. Okay? At that point, we declared a major incident